First off, I'd like to ask, how do you think you got to where you are?
I made a lot of decisions. So, found out about another server on TTT back in 2018 when I was in high school. At that time, I was 15 years old. I found it through a mutual friend. He would play it all the time, and he would deafen because he was afraid people would think we're ghosting because they can hear us through his mic. So he would be deafened all the time, and I was just like, well, if you can't beat him, join him, kind of thing. And I ended up getting really into it. After Mo got blacklisted, I moved over to Velkon. I tried when I first got that blacklisted, but I wasn't really willing to give up my items just yet. And then Mo got shut down, so I moved to Velkon, and I guess I made some connections during that time that kind of kept me involved, like with the community. And over time, I was able to contribute to some of the code through the other developer, and then eventually I became one myself. So there's that.
If it's okay if I ask, how old are you now?
I'm 21 and 9 months old.
And you started developing for Velkon around what time?
I was 18.
So within 3 years, you were passionate enough to start developing for this server.
I think my level of commitment was already pretty high. I was like head admin for a while. I think at that point in time, it was like the longest anybody had been head admin, like sitting ever. So I was already pretty committed, but I will concede that towards the end of my head admin time, I was getting pretty burnt, and just like some interpersonal issues with like management and so on. So I lost my train of thought. But eventually, yeah, I went from T staff to developer in about a year's time. I think it was like 54 weeks. So
and did you start getting paid?
Yeah.
How much would you say you make, or maybe an alternative question, maybe, do you think the money that you make from this could sustain you financially?
For what time period?
Let's say like a month, if we like consider like housing and like just like general life taxes.
All I really want to say on that is that I make enough. That's all.
And how much time do you think you spend if we were to consider this like an hourly job?
Well, it depends if an event's coming up or not. I mean, it's Velkon, so there's always an event coming up. But okay, so let's say no event. I'd say like 10 hours max. And during event, I'd say like 30-ish hours is pretty fair.
From how much that you work, would you say that it's something that you enjoy most of the time?
Yeah, I do. And I really should preface that the amount of time I put in is very just contingent on like how much I feel like personally getting things done. If I were to do like the very bare minimum required regimen, like nothing additional, no quality life, just like only event content, I could probably only work like maybe 10 hours a month, if that. It's just, I just kind of want to. So yeah, I'd say I enjoy it. It's something I like to do.
And when you spend more time, or when you put more effort into it, do you get rewarded more for that? Or is it more of your own personal, passion for it?
To a degree, but not one that is strangely high, or it's just like a little bit. But it's the flat rate, I suppose, is more than fine.
So it's kind of fractional of what you normally...
Yeah, if I work, it's funny, I think the month I got paid the most was probably the month I did the least. But for the most part, the pay is consistent with how much I work. But past a certain point, like, there are definitely times where I'm putting, 100 hours or more a month into the server. Then during those times, I mean, I'm not going to get paid like significantly more than 40 hours or something.
Earlier, when you mentioned that you were able to get to this job because of connections, how significant were those connections? Like, when you were making those connections, did you realize it at the time that like this would lead to this, or was it more just like, you just became friends with them, and this just happened to happen?
I was just friendly. I mean, I'd say to a degree, I always had like the ambition to be head admin, so I was just very good with like upper staff and so on. Otherwise, I mean, it was just friendly.
Let's just say you never met those people. Do you think you'd still be able to get to a position like this?
It depends which ones. Most people, I definitely say it could have been possible, just like less likely. But there are definitely people where, you know, it would have been impossible or just like extremely unlikely.
For people out there who, you know, aren't really good with like being social or making connections, like what advice could you give on that matter?
You should start looks maxing.
Interesting.
I mean, not really. I mean, I don't know. Like, just talk. I mean, that's usually how I make friends. I mean, I'd say getting a conversation started to a degree can, but I feel like conversations themselves are not that hard.
Do you think that a lot of this might have been luck, or you think that it was mostly like your decisions directly? You did mention earlier that you got here by making a lot of decisions, but how much of the factor do you think luck plays within that?
I mean, it definitely played a factor, especially early on.
Do you think that it was likely that you were gonna get here without that luck?
I think it would have been entirely possible eventually, but I guess it's like the other one. It just depends which one. You know, some I could see myself doing it maybe a couple more months or maybe another year down, but then it just becomes unlikely that I would have stuck it out that long, you know. And then there are other possibilities where the opportunity likely would not have presented itself at all. So,
Moving on to more of the present, do you think your relations with the people you work with have changed a lot over time, or do you think it's just stayed the same, if not better?
I'd say the same, if not better, for most. You know, things happen good. For others, I mean, you know, sometimes people, you know, just grow apart, I guess. I don't know. So, but for the most part, I mean, nothing ever went like outright terrible from what I understand.
Do you feel proud enough about this to like share it with other people in real life, or is it something where it's like you're very embarrassed about it in real life and you like would not tell anyone?
I mean, like my family knows, my friends know, my girlfriend knows, but I mean, it's just not something I can talk to most people about because it's like, oh, you know, you work for GMOD, right? Like a GMOD server. You know, a lot of people don't know what GMOD is or have like any concept of what work I'm actually like accomplishing. So it's a conversation I tend to avoid by being vague with most, but I wouldn't really say it's something I'm embarrassed about. It just kind of becomes a conversation that is more than I intended it to be.
If you feel like a lot of people don't know about GMOD, how secure do you think this position might?
I'm just gonna say it's hard to say. You know, I always, well, not always. I wouldn't say I have this outlook anymore, but I used to have a very pessimistic outlook when it came to the life expectancy of Velkon. I always thought I'll be ending like soon, like in a year, you know, year and a half, 2 years maybe, and you know, we'll hit like it'll be like dry for a little bit, usually during like between Easter and summer. That's like a pretty dry period, and I'll be thinking like, damn, you know, if the summer event isn't great, then we're cooked. And then the summer event goes well, and it's just kind of been repeating like that for a while. So it's hard to say, you know, but I plan to continue to do the work. You know, once I don't get paid anymore, I'll probably take a back seat. I will say that.
Okay, you know, you are very passionate about this. Do you think the community tends to, okay, there is a decent amount of negativity in the community, but that goes for a lot of online communities. Do you think this community would kind of affect like your morality when it comes to like working on the server, or do you kind of just brush it off?
I'd say I, for the most part, brush it off, but I do want to say that I don't really think Velkon is like any more toxic than like any other online community. I think that's just a factor of online communities. You know, the anonymity is a big deal. I feel like people tend to bring out sides of themselves they typically wouldn't online. In real life, I feel like most people are afraid of confrontation, really. So it's just like, it's kind of what the source is. I mean, it's the internet, you know, you brush it off.
Do you tend to feel pressured when you're working with like expectations from not just the community, but like deadlines and maybe the other people you work with as well?
Honestly, mostly during like event crunch time, because you know people are like really wanting the event out, and you know we're still working on it. And during that time, I'd say there's a bit of pressure, but for the most part, not really. I mean, I know there's like a certain expectation, but I think for the most part, I tend to meet people's expectations, or mostly surpass them, I'd imagine. So I think it's fine.
Do you happen to enjoy playing the game that you work on, or is it more of just because like the fact that you work on it, it isn't really as enjoyable?
I mean, I'd say one of the like biggest contributors to like me playing and sticking to the server for so long was that I just really enjoyed the inventory. I liked, you know, I just like having things, I guess, pixels, right? But once you're dev and you can spawn items, like, you know, that aspect of the game is essentially gone. So yeah, it's it's kind of whatever now. I mean, I'll play with friends sometimes, but otherwise not really, no.
Okay, I'm just gonna give a little bit of context. This server, I guess you could say, has competitors or servers that are similar in the way how Fortnite and PUBG can be competitors because they're under the same genre. Would you say that those competitors kind of pressure you or have any effect on you, or it's just something where you know that Velkon's big enough to where it doesn't really matter?
I mean, if you want to talk about the Mo inventory servers that exist other than Velkan, with regards to those servers in particular, I don't really believe we have any competition. They're much smaller. They don't really come close to us on numbers, and I feel like a lot of their content is just derivative of ours. Not really something I'd say I'm concerned about.
Where do you think you get your inspiration for adding things into this game?
Some ideas are original, and they just kind of come to me during the day. I'd say I'd come up with some ideas on an original basis, just like throughout my day. But I also draw inspiration from other games, like where possible, just because it's like, okay, here's an idea that worked, right? How can I maybe realign this, within the scope of TTT, right? And like obviously not everything is like transferable, just because like the combat system is like fairly basic if you think about it. So other than that, you just gotta hope you come up with something. I'd say sometimes it's harder than others, but that's all I have about that.
Would you say that the ideas that come from the community are any impact on your creative output or your creative decisions?
Yeah, I'd say we definitely use community ideas sometimes, but not super often. Honestly, most of the suggestions, as far as like items, I guess, are pretty bad. And just with other things too. Like I see like a actually crazy suggestion in balance changes chat every day. But for the most part, I'd say like, yeah, we consider what everybody's saying, if it's reasonable or not, and then, I do what I have to do.
Earlier when you said like crazy suggestions, I assume you mean like negatively crazy, like not logical.
Yeah, I mean illogical.
Could you think of an example of a time where a community suggestion did make it in and was like a good idea?
Onslaught.
What would you say, like, other than like your just creative ideas, like, are there other factors that contribute to if an idea or item or whatever actually makes it into the game?
I mean, it's basically just idea, try to make it reasonable for gameplay, and then you make it. And then, adjustments are made, as we go. But, things smoothing out.
Within developing within this community for some time, would you say that there would be any chance that a competitor could take over?
I think if Velkan shut down the servers, a competitor would probably take over. I mean, Moat was still having players when it was blacklisted. I mean, people, I enjoy the things that I add. I think we add good things. I think our content's good. I feel like our quality of life is good. Like things look good. But I feel like the biggest drawing factor for most people are their items. Like people already have a lot of time invested into their inventory. It's just unlikely they'd switch servers unless they had to. And so that's why, a lot of people who are like permabanned from Velkan, for example, they play a competitor server and they stick to one in particular because that server gives them free items when they join or something. And just because, they have a little bit of inventory to start with, they just stick to that one. It really just comes down to the inventory for most people. So yeah, I think as long as Velkan is up, it's fine.
Do you think it will get to the point where it can reach like a larger audience? When I say larger audience, I mean maybe like 10x, 30x, 100x times more.
10x, I think, is something that's maybe possible in time if we make some savvy decisions with like expanding into other games and like etc. Velkon has previously told me that he's in it for the long haul, so to speak. So, and I'm right there with him as well. So I think we can go further if we make the right choices, but it's hard to say. So far, no dice, but you never know.
Is there any pressure to expand, or is Velkon, or maybe not just Velkon, but like we'll say like the dev team as a whole?
I'd say Velkon is the one who brings it up the most, but I guess during low times where we're only having like one full server or something, sometimes we think about it, but I wouldn't say it's like pressure. It's just more like this is something we should do.
Do you feel proud of the way how the community is? Like, do you feel like, oh, it could be better, or do you have a different mindset? a different thought process.
I feel for the most part, I enjoy the community. I mean, there are definitely some unsavory characters that have been in the community previously, or like maybe lurk or something. But for the most part, like 99% of people, I'd say I'm glad they play.
Do you get inspiration from just everything, or just like specifically games? I'll just give an example. Let's just say a server has a dev that like, oh, like let's just say they take inspiration from like cryptocurrency for transactions. Let's say that's just like, that doesn't make sense, but you know what I mean by like that type of it can take inspiration for anything outside of just games itself.
I think mostly in naming conventions. I like to name a lot of guns after songs I like, albums I like. That's pretty common. Frost God is an example. Warlord, Eversense, and Unknown Death are all albums. Eversense is a Blade album. He's a Swedish rapper. And Warlord and Unknown Death are a Young Lean album, and he's also a Swedish rapper.
When you were younger, when I say younger, like maybe 7, did you have any other aspirations other than game dev, or is this just something that just popped up in your life and you kind of just went with it?
I mean, I've been programming a long time. I think I started when I was 11, so 2014. But game dev, not really. I feel like corporate game dev, like let's say I worked at Activision or like Riot or something, right? The workload is significantly more, and your compensation is significantly less. Not less than what I'm being paid now, but less than like the general computer science market. So like, if I worked as like a data analyst or like, in financial tech or medical tech or something, I would make a lot more money. Or just working like full stack for like any other company.
Have you ever considered, oh wait, that was really, sorry, you don't have to answer that one. Okay.
Have you ever considered killing yourself?
No, but, oh wait, that is actually something I did want to bring up.
What?
Not the killing yourself part, it's general like mental health things.
Oh, that's crazy.
Okay, because the work you do does affect a lot of people that play this game. It may not be like thousands, but it's like enough to where like the people that play this game usually play it a lot, and so it's a considerable amount of effect. Do you, as a creative, do you feel like that kind of like the fact that you're dealing with such a strong community, we'll say, do you feel like that has any effect on your mental health at all? Or like earlier, you kind of just brush it off?
I mean, I take pride in the fact that I can bring joy to people. That's like one of my favorite things to say when people accuse me of having a fake job. So yeah, I do bring joy to a fair amount of people's lives through the game, which I do enjoy. I wouldn't really say any negatives come with it.
This community has a history, or we'll say kind of like a pattern of mental disorders and people that are not. And I'm not just criticizing on that. I myself have ADHD, autism. But something that I've noticed is that a lot of people on this community have mental disorders of some kind, or some sort of like, I wouldn't want to say mental impairment, but they're mentally different or cognitively different. Do you think that Velkon Gaming is something where the concept of it itself happens to bring in those people, or it's just more of like a luck thing or some sort of like weird coincidence?
Have you gotten these diagnoses officially from the players, or?
Yeah, from at least okay, because this is a little bit flawed on my part, because I might just be like someone that like attracts mentally ill people, but for me at least, when like from a lot of the people I've met on this community and have met to be, I guess, close enough with to talk with them, a majority of them have some sort of mental illness, whether it's like dyslexia or ADHD, which is the most common one, at least from like what they've said. Like they've had prescriptions for it. A majority, when I say, like maybe like 70 to 80% of the people I meet and are close enough. But that could just be something on my part where I'm just like, I just attract those people.
Yeah, I feel like people with a wide range of disability, I feel, exist on all settings. I'm not saying it's necessary that you attract people of that note, but someone who doesn't have one isn't very likely to just say they don't have one, if you catch my drift. It just stands out more. It's kind of just confirmation bias, I believe.
Okay. Within that, do you feel like the gameplay or just aspects of Velkon as a whole, whether it's community, gameplay, etc., do you think that sometimes it may be a little bit constricting. I'm not accusing that like people made it that way. It could just be purely like coincidental. Actually, you don't have to answer that question. You can answer that if you want to, but just let me know if you want a different question.
I feel when you think about video games as a whole, like let's just apply this thinking like multilaterally for a second. So, majority of games have some sort of, attribute that, will keep players invested in the game. I mean, at the end of the day, gaming is, it is an economic market. It's an entertainment market. You have to do something or provide something that is of some note to the player, or else, they'll find it elsewhere. I feel most people have a fairly healthy balance with these mechanics, and you can find that in most games as well. But there are people who become, in a sense, addicted to the game. It's natural. It happens in every game. I think you notice it more on Velkon because the Velkon community is so, connected. Like, these people to a degree. Like, the people that talk and trading all day. I mean, people at this point practically know them, right? Whereas, like, let's say you just play a lot of, like, Valorant or something. I mean, you might know a few players, but you're never going to know, like, the majority of Valorant players, So it would be kind of hard to, like, test that claim against empirical evidence in that situation. But, in this situation, it's like a lot more obvious that, some people are truly addicted to the game. But I believe this is something that happens in all games.
Do you think that sort of like increase for profits or increase for growth, do you think that like affects your decisions a lot? I know we touched on this a little bit earlier with like the expansion, but like maybe we'll say more of like you yourself. Do you think it has like a subconscious impact on the decisions you make?
I'd say it definitely has an impact on the decisions I make. I wouldn't say it's like the largest factor. I feel like most people would assume that, but I wouldn't say it's the largest factor. But I mean, it is still a factor, So it definitely goes into some things, like putting the unknown death, like the crystals in the 500 pack. That was, I mean, very obviously a financial decision that I was like, all right, I'm gonna put these things in, and I'm only gonna put it in this top donation spot. So if you want to like try them out or whatever, that was my original thought. I thought people would be so interested to try them out that they'd spend money on them, but that wasn't really the case. It just turned out that people would do it after they realized like the quality or the benefit they could obtain from the item.
This is like a question you can also skip if you want, but I do think it is a good question. Compared to like the other developers that you work with, do you think that you work more?
Yeah.
I don't want to like give you like loaded questions or anything like that, but how do you feel about like the people you work with? Are you like proud to be working with them, or is it more of just like a thing of life now that you work with them, but like it could be better?
I think we work together well. I feel like I get along pretty well with them as well. I wouldn't really say I have much of a personal relationship with like Velkon in particular, the person. But Zedge and I talk pretty often. I'd say we're friends. So, I'd say our relationship's pretty good. I mean, yes, sometimes it's a little frustrating because I feel like, other people may not care as much as I do, or at least it feels that way. But I wouldn't say that's like an active feeling. It's something that kind of comes and goes.
This is something more related to, you can skip this if you want as well. Would you say that the split of finances between you, Velkon, and Zedge is fair, or at least like you're satisfied with, or do you feel like, your ambition for it warrants a little bit more of a share?
I feel like I'm compensated fairly.
Would you say that within this niche, okay, because like marketing is something that like is very important within selling anything really, but would you say the marketing in Velkon Gaming is something that's super necessary, or would you say it doesn't really play any role at all, or if there isn't any at all?
I'd say most people who find out about the server find out their word of mouth, or they just kind of stumble upon it because we're highest up on the server list, most likely. So marketing, not really so much. Having Velkon in your name is just more of like a combat towards other servers, I guess. Not really a combat, but it's fairly limited. That's really the only marketing I'd say we do. Are you basically just asking if I have regrets?
Okay, yeah, no, it is basically that. I think, yeah.
I think everybody has regrets. I think everybody has alternate paths they could have taken that they consider. Do I think my life would necessarily be like 100% better? I mean, who knows? Every decision leads to the next one. So it's kind of hard to say.
Do you have any advice for the viewer, whether Velkon player or anything at all, at least from like what you've witnessed and from your general life observations?
Starts looks maxing.
Interesting.
No, I'm playing. Honestly, not really. I'd say just be true to yourself. That's like my number one advice. Or be true to yourself. Oh yeah.
I think that'd be all. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to allow me to interview you.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Well, I'm gonna head out. All right. So take care.